Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of the Connections and Chaos podcast. This week's episode is going to be a little bit different. Number one, I don't have a mukbang. I went on a walk a little bit ago, and I went to Dairy Queen. Insert picture of the aftermath. It was so good. If you're wondering what I got a medium sundae with pineapple, cherries, and marshmallow syrup. Sounds totally weird, but it's inspired by my cherry berry order, which I get the cherry Dole Whip and the pineapple Dole Whip, and then I put the marshmallow sauce on top. Exquisite. Yeah, it was really good, and that's why I don't have a mukbang, so I decided to do that. However, today's gonna be a different episode. It's going to be entirely history-based, and this is going to be a segment that I call Evan Teaches History. Yo, let's give it a theme song.
Come on, don't play with me this time. Come on. I'm on a mission to educate, and you know that I don't hesitate. I always give my opinion straight, and please don't call this news fake. I'm Evan. I'm teaching history. We're gonna talk about things before me. Yeah, I'm Evan.
Oh, no, that was a pretty good theme song. All right. So in this first episode, per the poll I had in my Snapchat story, we're going to be talking about the Iraq War and all that it came with. And boy, did it come with a lot. So with what we'll be talking about, we're going to be going through a little timeline of the Iraq War, followed by the cultural impact it had on the U.S. Now, this is not an exhaustive analysis. This is simply what I quickly gathered from Wikipedia, previous research I did for back in high school, along with just other information I've gotten over the years. And I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of what happened, a couple of the controversies, and then I will tell you about the cultural impact. So let's get into it. So first, we'll start with a little bit of background. So in order to understand the Iraq War, also known as the Second Gulf War, we have to go all the way back to 1990, in which we have the First Gulf War. So to give you a quick rundown, George H.W. Bush, he sends a military action to Kuwait because the leader of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, invades Kuwait for oil. Long story short, it ends pretty well for the U.S. In fact, because of the Project Desert Storm in the First Gulf War, we see a resurgence in American pride for our military. Because if you remember, 30 years before that, you have the Vietnam War. That left a pretty bad taste in people's mouths, and people really did not kind of enjoy the military. They saw them all as baby killers. This kind of ended that in a way. Now it was American pride. And one thing to note is that this was also on American television. People saw it happening in real time. And so that definitely had its own impact. So basically, Saddam Hussein had it out for George H.W. Bush. And if we flash forward another 10 years, it's the 2000 election. It is between the current vice president at the time, Al Gore, and Governor of Texas, George W. Bush, son of former President George H.W. Bush. And that election came out pretty hotly contested. If you know, you know, Al Gore won the popular vote. In fact, he won the U.S. presidential election at first, and everyone thought, because most TV networks were calling the state of Florida for Al Gore. However, then it became too close to call, and it in fact installed a recount in Florida. Now, there's something to really know about this recount, is that the governor of Florida was Jeb Bush, the son of George H.W. Bush, former president, the brother of George Bush, the governor of Texas, and the person running for president. And there was this controversy of this thing called the butterfly ballot, which I'm going to draw up the butterfly ballot for y'all. So the butterfly ballot looked a little bit something like this. Pretty confusing, right? So you have your candidates, you have George Bush, Al Gore, Pat Buchanan, which we'll talk about him in a minute, and then let's just say Miley Cyrus and Hannah Montana were running. So people would come in, you know, they'd have their ballots, and they'd be marking the second one right here because they thought they were going for Al Gore, but in reality, they were going for Pat Buchanan. And the biggest controversy was that there was this idea that people double punched because we punched the first one, they're like, oh shit, that's Pat Buchanan. He's a reform candidate. When they meant to vote for Al Gore. Long story short, there were hand recounts done where they were looking at the thing called the hanging chad, which was like a little hanging piece of paper, and they had to decide was that a full punch, a half punch, or what. And basically, this recount went on for ages. And the Supreme Court of the United States ruled, I think it was a 5-4 decision, where they said, stop the recount, it's unconstitutional, just let George Bush win. And George Bush won by a difference of 537 votes, which there's a lot of controversy because a lot of people were voting for Pat Buchanan in Palm Beach County, which was a historically very liberal county in Florida. Now, if that was the case, there would be an issue that it was valid. And long story short, George Bush became president. In January 2001, he was inaugurated. You know what else happened in 2001? 9/11. So, trying to get my notes out. So starting in 2001, of course, we have 9/11, the attack on the World Trade Center. 3,000 people died. And on October 7th of 2001, the U.S. decides to invade Afghanistan, in which we take over. We essentially got out the Taliban, which they were sheltering Osama bin Laden, who we found to be the reason why this is all happening, and of course he was connected to Al-Qaeda. Also, do not come for me for any misinformation I'm giving out. Don't believe everything I say. This is just some of my research, and I put together some quick little fucking notes that I did partially use the Apple AI Summarize for, so sorry. And so Iraq really comes into this picture around like the same time, because George W. Bush said, hey, Iraq, you're a big issue. You have weapons of mass destruction, also known as these WMDs. I know someone who also have WMDs, and it's one of my friends, except the WMD stands for Wildly Massive Double Ds. So, you know who you are, girl, I love you. But basically, so with this accusation, the US and the UK, they're like, you, Saddam Hussein from 10 years earlier, who threatened to kill George H.W. Bush. I don't think actually threatened to kill, but he probably wanted to, because he just lost a war to him. And so essentially, there's also this false claim that he also bought uranium from the country of Niger. And keep in mind, also at this time, George W. Bush is raging the war on terrorism. The war on terrorism. The war that's still going on. And essentially, the U.S. says that Saddam Hussein, he has Al-Qaeda. This had very little evidence. The intelligence in the U.S. knew it had very little evidence. But the executive office said, it's alleged. Alleged. You see, it's not proven, therefore he can't sue us. And they also said that he was committing human rights abuses, especially with the brutal repression that was going on within the Anfal campaign it was. And he killed a bunch of Kurdish people with chemical weapons. And so in 2002, Congress, including some of your favorite senators at the time, like Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, they voted to authorize the use of military force, aka they voted for war, in Iraq. Now, this was a 77-23 vote in the Senate. In the House, it was a 296-133 vote. And then on November 8th of 2002, the UN Council passes Resolution 1441, demanding Iraq to allow UN weapons inspectors to have full access. Because, you know, everyone follows the UN's rules. And so by 2003, the U.S. officially invades Iraq on March 20th. So this was the U.S. and a couple allies. We have the Operation Iraqi Freedom. And this is all like summarized AI that I used, because if these were my actual notes, it'd be really bad. But essentially, so with this, we have the invasion known as Shock and Awe, in which we were bombing and targeting Baghdad. We were just going, bow, 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 bow. That's what we were doing. And the Iraqi army quickly was overwhelmed. And they were like, fuck. They got double Ds, they got TDs, they got WMDs, which the U.S. has WMDs, right? Like, we have nukes. Hello? Anyways, on April 9th, Baghdad falls. The U.S. is like, huzzah, 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 we did it. And then on May 1st, George Bush fucking goes out there and he does his speech, and behind him is a ship the fucking, I think it's like the Abe Lincoln or something, and it has his banner that says "Mission Accomplished" on it, and he gives the famous "Mission Accomplished" speech. And during this, he declares that war is over. But then we went right back in. And by December 2003, Saddam Hussein is captured. If you know the Saddam Hussein hiding spot, he was in that little hole, which they captured Saddam Hussein underground. This is him. This is his air vent. This is the ground. He was in a fucking dirt bunker. And once we do this, then he gets put on trial. There's a famous in him being like, oh, ah! And he's like basically cussing everyone out because he was sentenced to be executed. You know, yeah. I'm not going to talk about that one. But yeah, if you want to find that video, you can. I think he got executed in 2005. But basically in 2004, the U.S. gets in a lot of fucking shit because we have what is known as the I think it's Ghraib prison scandal, in which the U.S. was accused of torturing prisoners, which I don't know if you know, but torture is kind of bad. Like, remember when we talked about Spanish Inquisition? That, but worse. And this was really bad considering the fact that we have senators like John McCain who were in fact torture victims during the Vietnam War. So this is looking like a bad rap for the U.S. considering the fact that we have war heroes that, you know, we were like, they were tortured. And then we're doing this to fucking prisoners in Iraq? Damn. And then we have the October surprise of the 2004 election, in which Osama bin Laden releases this video, and it goes on the internet, in which he claims responsibility for 9/11. And this does amazing numbers for the Bush campaign, because what did they do? They accused him of 9/11, and yeah, George Bush, he rides on a high wave, wins re-election, and then his second term ended up being an absolute shitstorm, including him nominating a random woman from his council team onto the Supreme Court, and she bombs her hearings, and he has to withdraw her. The housing crisis. Yeah, the second term was not good for him. It was like watching a Bad Girls Club. It's terrible. But anyways, so by 2006, we have essentially the leader of Al-Qaeda. His name's Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Guys, I apologize for making these names right. He's the leader of Al-Qaeda, and he's killed in Iraq, and he's killed by U.S. airstrike. 2006, Saddam Hussein was executed. There we go. And after being executed, it was because of the massacre he committed in 1982. Saddam Hussein was kind of a dictator. Maybe he was a dictator. He was a dictator, like, yeah. Excuse me, but I don't know if, like, he considered himself one. Anyways, but yeah, he was executed on December 30th. He was hung. Yeah, and if you watch the video of it, not of him being hung, but like the video of him like trying to defend himself, it's pretty sad. It's depressing to watch because you know what he did. And then I don't know if I should talk about this. Actually, I'm gonna leave this for later when we talk about the cultural impact. But essentially, it's really something really fucking funny to watch, even though the like context behind it is understandable. Anyways, so by 2011, U.S. President Barack Obama, his administration, they capture Saddam Hussein, and he is killed by the U.S. Navy SEALs. And then on December 18, 2011, the U.S. officially withdraws troops from Iraq, which ends the war. However, we still stay in there because instability and, you know, what do they call it? Society building, like, Anyways, so that's the technical end of the war. However, in 2014, we have the rise of ISIS, also known as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. And they capture Mosul, which is Iraq's second largest city. And then in 2014, the U.S. does airstrikes against ISIS, drone strikes, and all that stuff with new military technologies. By 2017, in December, the Iraqi government declares victory over ISIS again. That happens. a lot of this I've not researched. This is just some quick gathering of information. And then 2020, if you remember, the start of World War III that we all thought it was going to be, the U.S. killed an Iranian general soldier in a drone strike in Baghdad, and this escalated tensions with Iran. And yeah, that was scary because I thought it was going down for real. It's going down. Anyways, so the U.S. administration ends its combat in Iraq by December of 2021. I think it was December 9th. I know that because it was a very important day for me. So that was anyway. I'm gonna stop talking. But anyways, so by December 9th of 2021, the U.S. officially withdraws troops, and we just take an advisory role within Iraq, and that was the end of the combating missions. And just some things to think about when we think about this. Number one, there was no WMDs found or known to have been in Iraq. If you ask me personally, this feels like a personal thing with George W. Bush somehow because, his dad. That's just my theory. And then, however, Iraq is still continuing to be a very politically unstable country. Now, I want to talk about a very specific controversy that kind of surrounded this, and it's that a U.S. weapons manufacturer, Halliburton, was the company that was ran by the vice president at the time, Dick Cheney. Well, he left in 2000, but he still had financial ties to it. And essentially, there's this controversy and this idea, that Halliburton influenced the war policies that were going on. And essentially, how can I kind of summarize all this? So basically by 2003, when we invaded Iraq, Halliburton became the largest private contractor in the country that was supplying arms to the U.S. This is also because they had an oil infrastructure in Iraq. We were supporting the troops. They were providing food for the troops. They had construction projects and military bases all around the world. And in 2004, there was a whistleblower testimony. Someone from the Pentagon found that Halliburton did not account for $8.1 billion in Iraq-related expenses. These whistleblowers were former Halliburton employees, and they testified about price gouging and all this stuff. And of course, this is all tied back to Dick Cheney, who was rumored to have helped push for war in Iraq so that his company that he still had financial ties to could make billions. So there's that, and there was also fraud within the company. But yeah, so that's a little controversy that happened that I like to talk about. So now that we got our history out the way, it's time to talk about our analysis, aka the cultural influence of the war. So one thing that I really do like to talk about the Iraq War is that it went from being highly supported and well received within the U.S. to being not. Just to give a quick little recap, according to the Pew Research Center, I will put my sources in, of course. From 2003 to 2011, there were many discussions and records being kept about war and the opinion of it, and essentially there showed a large shift in opinion. 73% of Americans favored military action in 2003. And of course, this particular reason was because everyone believed, the White House largely, that Iraq had WMDs. However, when this became debunked in 2011, the Bush administration's accusal of Iraq being connected to terrorism kind of blurred the lines between the country and 9/11. And I will put in this graph to show the figure depicting the percentages of those who think it was the right decision and wrong decision to invade Iraq. 73% approved of it in 2003. However, by mid 2005, others had two options. It became largely the minority, fluctuating between 45 and 50% ratings. And by early 2007, it was a drastic downcline on people who supported the war. And although there's no specific evidence to explain the shift, it can mainly be agreed that upon this, it was a high death toll of both Iraqi civilians and American soldiers. And then the instability was largely not really helping world peace, which that's what we were going for. And the order just kind of seemed that the key factors of why we invaded were not being met. And essentially the Iraq War, with these fluctuating opinions, these were reflected in American culture. And one of the first things that ever kind of like occurred and reflected this was the, how can I say this, the cancellation of the Chicks, formerly known as the Dixie Chicks. And so with that, this is all the way back in 2004 when opinions were still largely favorable of the war. The Chicks were in the UK at the time, and they were at a concert, and they said, and I quote, "We do not want this war, this violence, and we're ashamed that the President of the United States is from Texas." Those, like, 15 words right there changed their trajectory. After that, they became the black sheep of country music. They were not played on the radio. People were burning their albums. And essentially these actions were seen as that the Dixie Chicks were, or the Chicks were not patriotic. And Natalie Maines, who said it, she was a front woman of the group basically, she got death threats. People started to find her address. It was getting bad just because she said, "We do not support the war. We are disappointed in the president, XYZ." And they really did not rebound until about 15 years later. It was dark for them, to say the least. They fell off so hard. And this indignation towards them really did kind of show how high level the support was, especially between 2008 and 2004. But come 2005, when things start to change, the media definitely depicts it. And so after the Chicks, there were multiple new things coming in the media that really depicted the change in opinion. Now, although this happened before, the first like anti-war media that kind of came out was American War by Madonna. Or sorry, not American War, American Life by Madonna. And she called it her woke album. She didn't, but it was supposed to be like her woke album at the time. She was supposed to be very politically active. However, what would have made this statement true never came out officially. If you search up the American Life unreleased music video, you will see it was this huge video where she depicted dead babies, American consumerism, and the undoubted support of the war. And she was commenting on how this is not what it seems like. This is unfounded. It will, in fact, cause more harm than good and waste money. And she showed that in her music video. She came out on this, like, Mini Cooper, and she had, like, a machine gun. And she was essentially blowing away all the rich people's heads to be like, look what you're doing. And so that was, like, the first anti-war sentiment, but she never released it because she knew she would have been thrown in the gutter. And this was even before the Chicks got canceled. But really, what kind of like showed that opinion was changing came in mid-2004, surprisingly after the Chicks were canceled. And it was American Idiot by Green Day. And this entire album is just commentary on the political situation at the time. But especially with American Idiot, you know, it talks about the idiot nation where everyone wants to be okay. You know, you count your dreams of tomorrow and all that stuff. But if you listen to, like, especially the song American Idiot, you kind of get to understand that he's commenting on how people are following this war like sheep because they think that they are supporting patriotism and peace on earth, when in reality, this is just an invasion on some unfounded claims. So there was that first section. And this really kind of, like, signified when, like, the culture that was against the war started to become more popular. Especially because Green Day, they were a big alternative band. They're not actually alternative, but they were a big band in that, like, culture. And they were essentially bringing a lot of the ideas that were being portrayed in the subcultures of punk and rock. Because country at the time was very big, it was very patriotic. You had people like Toby Keith, Gretchen Wilson, right? Yeah, Gretchen Wilson. I almost said Gretchen Carlson, not her. They were all coming out with all these, like, big patriotic songs, you know, don't fuck with America kind of shit. Excuse me. And then that American Idiot comes out, and that's when a lot of music started becoming anti-war. And by 2007, we have this infamous debate between two hosts on The View, which is an all-women talk show, and this is between Rosie O'Donnell and Elizabeth Hasselbeck. I will play the clips right now just for everyone to see.
sat in the classroom after learning about 9/11
No, so he was supposed to freak out the kids when he was reading to
read
them,
My
I
Pet
suppose.
Goat for 7 minutes after we were attacked on 9/11.
Right, he should have definitely
He
panicked
lied
the
to
children.
get
I
us
recommend
into
that.
the war. He awarded a no-bid contract to Halliburton, Abu Ghraib. He promoted his friend Michael Brown to take care of Katrina. Heck of a job, Brownie. Remember that? Yeah. He doesn't listen to the Iraq Study Group. He choked on a pretzel.
This is proof that he choked on a pretzel. This is literally President Bush after he choked on a pretzel.
That's the word nuclear. These are just some of the
Going to pull out.
The enemy's in Iraq?
Al Qaeda?
Wait, the enemy's in Iraq.
He didn't even go after
Elizabeth.
Osama bin Laden when he was supposed to.
Wait, Joy. You just said our enemy's in Iraq. Did Iraq attack us?
No, I'm saying Al Qaeda.
Okay.
is
Did
in
Iraq attack us, Elizabeth?
Iraq did not attack us,
Correct.
Rosie. We've been there before.
Well,
I'm saying our enemies, Al Qaeda. Are you hearing that?
I hear it, but where do you want to go, Bub?
We're going to political discussion with
Right.
Don't interview each other. Just say what
If
you
you're
mean.
playing a game, okay? If you're playing a game and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to throw to my wide receiver, wide right, okay? Do you do that? I'm going to do it in 2 seconds. What does that do for your enemy?
Well, you know what,
Give them
Elizabeth?
time to
If the
plan.
enemy are innocent civilians, I don't want to play that kind of football.
The enemy are not innocent.
Iraq didn't attack us!
I am not innocent. Don't yell at each other. Enemy.
Please, let's have a conversation.
You know why I don't want to do this, Joy? No, let me tell you why I don't want to do it. Because here's how it gets spun in the media. Rosie, big, fat, lesbian, loud Rosie, attacks innocent, pure Christian Elizabeth. And I'm not doing it.
But
for the
you're
rest of
not
you.
doing it.
I'm not doing it.
I haven't heard the insinuations.
I defend my thoughts.
Your own thoughts.
Right, but every time I defend them, Elizabeth, it's poor little Elizabeth that I'm picking on.
You know what? Poor little Elizabeth is not poor little Elizabeth.
That's
okay?
right. That's why I'm not going to fight with you anymore, because it's absurd. So for 3 weeks, you can say all the Republican crap you want.
You
I'm
know
not
what?
going to do
It's much
it.
easier to fight someone like Donald Trump, isn't it? Because he's obnoxious.
I've never fought him. He fought me. I told a fact about him. He didn't like
this
the fact,
conversation.
and he went crazy.
I was in the middle of this
I gave you
conversation.
an opportunity
You
to
don't give me anything. You don't have to give me. I asked you a question.
I asked you a question.
And so essentially, this happened in May of 2007, and the discourse was massive on this. This is the first time The View ever went split screen, which it usually doesn't do. That's how heated it was. And of course, there are the personal sentiments, when did you not hear say big fat fucking Rosie attacks little poor innocent Elizabeth? But essentially, that debate was huge. It was 10 minutes of just ripping apart, and Elizabeth Hasselbeck saying, Al Qaeda, Al Qaeda. Like, it's Al Qaeda. Girl, just, God. Essentially, of course, while it was very much a personal deal, Rosie O'Donnell, she did not give a damn. And despite the public not supporting the U.S. involvement, she's like, do you not see this is unpopular? In fact, the more conservative of the two, Hasselbeck had more backlash from fans than O'Donnell did. And this was because she looked uneducated, because she was just screaming, but America in 9/11, like, the stuff she was saying did not, she's saying, like, this is why we're doing it. She wasn't backing up her position on why we should stay in there. Rosie's like, do you not see what's going on? All that. And then another very big impact culturally that we kind of saw was the shoes. The shoes. Play clip. Man, that's beautiful, isn't it? That's just like, sorry, keeping calls. That's just like pure journalism right there. But so essentially, George W. Bush, he was doing a press conference in December 2008, which this is after Barack Obama won too. I'd like to add, I don't know why, but I'm like, dude, you're already hated. Come on, dude. Anyways, but essentially, the journalist throws shoes at him, and he's in this way. It's a very extreme insult in Arab culture. He's calling him a dog, and the guy was mad that he only brought 2 shoes. He would have done more. But yeah, that became a really big thing, and that was played everywhere on YouTube. Everywhere on YouTube. So yeah. So largely the cultural impact was media became a very big commentator on this, more so than I think we see today. And I'm not going to talk about that, but yeah. What these, pieces of media kind of show is distrust in the government. Of course, the WMD lie that we had, and the overall anti-war sentiment that was brewing, it was the fact that no one trusted the government and what they were saying they were doing overseas. Especially by the time Bush left office, he had an approval rating in the low 20s, which after 9/11, he had an approval rating of like 93%, which is crazy. And then, of course, when Barack Obama wins, he's on this anti-war sentiment. There was just a lot of political polarization that happened at this point. We had the gap between conservatives and liberals be just pushed out the door. And we also had a lot of focus on veterans at this point. PTSD became more aware, and there was definitely some VA reform that I'm pretty sure happened at this time. Veteran culture in America became a pretty big thing because of things like the internet, and it wasn't necessarily like this also went on for years, might I add. The first Gulf War lasted a couple months. This was years, so the veteran impact was largely talked about, more so than before. And I don't really like to talk about this stuff because it's sad. But there was increased Islamophobia in the U.S., of course, due to post 9/11, and just overall anti-Muslim sentiment that was growing. And that's also a really big part of it. But most of it is distrust in the government that caused a lot of this media to rise. And not many of it was commentative. A lot of it was just giving their opinions. However, some of it was giving its opinions, stuff like the Patriot Act, which has expired now, but it was renewed once. But it just essentially, to sum everything up, the Iraq War made an entire generation of people, entire generation, largely millennials, the whole post 9/11 culture. And it created this idea of distrust in the government. It created a cultural impact of anti-war sentiment. And overall, it just saw the rise of political, I don't want to call it extremism, but definitely a deepening of political divide within the United States. And one thing that my generation should really look at is that this is one of the events that kind of like shaped how we were raised, especially with post 9/11. The post 9/11 world, I do think that us as children definitely were raised to be a little bit more patriotic. After 9/11, that's really when doing the Pledge of Allegiance in school became a bigger thing than it was before. And yeah, I just think it's nice to kind of look back at it and really think about the impacts it has on our culture. But yeah, thank you for coming. That was History with Evan. I'm sorry it wasn't that funny. Next week, we'll talk about something funnier. So yeah, bye.